Captain Robert Salas, the United States Air Force retired. Back in 1967, Bob was a missile launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. He says a UFO hovered over his nuclear missile site and disabled all the missiles.
And so, Carl, here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
Roswell, New Mexico is a quiet city of just 26,000 people. The majority of the population are ranchers or military.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
That intro never gets old. Just a shout out to my friend and filmmaker, Darcy Weir. He's the one who put that together. And let me tell you something, that man is very, very talented. Well, let me introduce myself to you. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dale, and my channel's name is Observer of Anomalous Objects. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you being here. If you haven't done it already, let me ask you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really will help the channel out. And if you like the video, and I'm sure you will, go ahead and hit that share button. That'll help push this video and this channel up in the algorithm for YouTube. I'm really excited today. I'll go ahead and bring my guest up right now. This is the one and only Margie Kay of the Onyx Network. You created that network, didn't you, Margie?
Yes, it was my idea, and I brought Race Hobbs in with me as our producer. And so now we've got about 30 shows on the network.
Oh, wow, that's pretty impressive. And you are the Chief Executive Officer of Onyx Network as well.
Yeah, unfortunately. A lot of responsibility comes with that title.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly.
Well, you're also an author. Can you go ahead and mention a few of your books and where people might be able to find those books?
Yeah, I've got 17 books, so I'll just mention a couple. Most recent one is called How to Research Your Haunted House, and that's by myself and Violet Wisdom. Violet is a professional researcher and a house researcher specifically. And so she basically wrote half the book, and then I wrote the other half. And we made a study of a particular house that I used to live in Springfield, Missouri, which is by far the most haunted house I've ever been in, bar none. And that's with all the paranormal investigations I've ever done as well. So that is a good read. It just came out, and it's available at Amazon. Okay. And I publish books by other people as well. So it's all at unxmedia.com, just unxmedia.com. It's got a full list. I co-wrote the Fast Movers book, which is about high-speed UFOs. And we've got, photographic evidence of that, video as well. But of course, that can't be put in a book. So we are planning a documentary on that soon. I'm also currently working on a documentary called Portals, which is about specific areas in the Midwest area that we believe are portal openings. And that's why there's so much paranormal activity going on.
Be similar to what's going on over at Skinwalker Ranch in a way. I mean, they believe there.
Very much so. We've got some that are just amazing.
Well, we had a little paranormal activity going on here too. I think I've only had my show echo twice in all the time I've been doing it. And Margie, it's something about when you and I get together that seems to happen. So I originally intended this to be recorded. And then when I went to do it, it was set up for live. And then when we tried to do live, that's when it echoed and we had to get out of there. And now we're back to doing a recording. So I'm really happy about that as well. There's a lot more I can do when the video is recorded. Now, since I had you on the last time, you got a promotion.
I got a little promotion, no money, but a promotion to Central Region Director for MUFON. So that's 6 states in my region.
Remember those off the top of your head, what 6 states you manage?
Yeah. Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, and North and South Dakota.
Wow. You know, I was born in Kansas, right?
Oh, really? We're
I'm a
at in
Lawrence.
Kansas.
Lawrence.
Lawrence. Oh, that's right across
Yeah.
the state line. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My grandmother, I got to see her before she died. She's in Topeka. My brother was born in Topeka. I think my dad was also born in Topeka. I'm not sure on that, but I think so anyway. And so I have a lot of connections to Kansas there. And I lived in Illinois for 5 years. And so I understand why they call Missouri misery now.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah.
We live in the state of misery. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the summer is pretty rough too. And, you know, with the humidity and the bugs but good people though. That's one thing I'll have to say. Really, really good people there. Well, the reason I brought you on is because you told me this really intriguing story about Ginger Rogers, and not just Ginger Rogers, but her mother.
Yeah.
And it's a ghost story. So why don't you go ahead and just start telling us that story? Just let it unfold for our audience.
In 2016, my husband and I have a real estate investment company. And so I told my finance manager, my daughter, who manages the money for our businesses, I told her that I was going to be purchasing a new house pretty soon. And so I was just warning her ahead of time we were going to be spending some money. So 10 minutes later, she came running down the stairs and said, "You have to buy this house." I said, "What house?" She goes, "The Ginger Rogers house is for sale." And the house where she was born is at 100 West Moore Street in Independence, Missouri. Everybody who's lived in Independence for any amount of time knows about the house. Not everybody has been there, but we knew, the history. And I said, "Oh, that'd be kind of neat." And so I was talking to my daughter about it. My husband was out of town at the time. And all of a sudden, I was trying to figure out if I should do this or not. And all of a sudden, these pennies started falling from nowhere, like from the ceiling down to the ground. And they were falling on my desk and the table and the ground. And one fell on my daughter's shoe. And we just looked at each other and said, "Pennies from heaven," which, of course, was a song that Ginger Rogers did.
Wow.
And so we took that as a sign that, yes, this should happen. And so I made an appointment and looked at the house. I put a retainer down and signed the contract. And the next day my husband got back in town and I told him what I did. He's like, "You did what?" We usually make these decisions together when it comes to high finance. So, but I told him what it was. He goes, "Oh yeah, that is a good deal. No matter what I'm getting into, it's going to be a good deal." Well, the house was falling apart. It took us 2 years to get that house ready for anything. There was just all kinds of structural problems, and we had to deal with the city, with the historical society, moving a window, things like that. Everything on the outside had to look exactly the same as it used to in 1911. And the house was built about 1909, we think. Anyway, shortly after, now this was only an investment property. We were going to fix it up, turn it into a short-term rental, an Airbnb type. And shortly after, my husband said, "You need to come over here and check this thing out because I think there's some ghosts here." Mm-hmm. Well, for my husband to say something like that, it's serious because nothing ever happens to him. He doesn't witness anything. He never sees things that I see. So I said, "Okay, well, what's going on?" He goes like, "Well, the saw, have running the saw and it keeps coming unplugged from the wall, but it's tight in the wall when he puts it in. He's not that far away from it, kept being pulled out." And then he would notice doors closing on their own and things like that. And there was nobody else there at the time. Well, right before we were getting ready to finish the house up, so the interior was almost done, I was standing in this vacant house in the room where Ginger Rogers was born. And I was thinking about, how am I going to set this room up? And I was thinking about setting it up as it would have looked in 1911 and get some antique, children's furniture in there and things like that. When this apparition started to form in front of me and it turned into a woman wearing a long dress, and I thought, "Oh, this is Ginger Rogers. She knows what we're doing. She's here." And so I saw her several times after that. I saw her sitting on the steps on the front porch on the left side. And we had other things going on. And I just had a really good feeling from her. I could also feel not only her presence, but her mother's presence. And keep in mind that I decided to turn this into a museum by that point. And we were going to have it open to the public. And I wanted to, so I was studying her mother. Oh God, Layla Rogers was just unbelievable woman. She was one of the first 10 female Marines, very, very, very early on. And she was a script writer. She went to Hollywood. She wrote scripts for shows and movies. And so Ginger was tagging along with her, going to vaudeville, learning to dance. Her mother was taking her dance lessons and all this. So I'm studying the history. I know these ladies, right? So I'm also very sensitive and very psychic, and I could feel their presence. So I knew we were doing the right thing and that their ghostly presence wasn't anything negative. But I also felt something else too. There was a darker energy that was separate from the two ladies. So I called, this gal called me from KC Paranormal one day out of the blue. She did not know who I was because Margie Kay is my pen name. It's my woo-woo name. Mm-hmm. Okay. So she did not know, but as the owner of the property under my real name, who I was. And she called me up one day and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I was just investigating a haunted property and left about 3:00 in the morning." She said, "Something told me to go by the Ginger Rogers house." And she said, "I had just heard that you bought it." So she knew about that. She saw Ginger Rogers sitting on the steps on the left side as an apparition. And then she faded out. So so I knew immediately this gal was the real deal because that's the same thing I'd seen and in the exact spot. And by the way, there's a 1941 Life magazine. Even I think she's on the cover of that magazine with her sitting on that porch on the left side. And so that seems to be like her favorite spot. Of course, I found that out later. I didn't know that. Anyway, we did turn it into a museum. We opened in 2018. We had a lot of people coming through the property, and I decided that since there were spirits there, that I would do some investigations. So I would have groups come in to do nighttime investigations. And on every single group that came through, when they went through into the bedroom where Ginger was born, I had this rocking chair sitting there, this child's rocking chair that I had purchased. It was antique. And every time somebody walked by there, their EMF meters would go off, all their equipment would go off. And so one evening I sat everybody in the living room and we're just looking into the small room. And I put my REM pod on that chair. It went crazy. It had never done that before.
Can you explain EMF and then the other device you just said for people that may not be aware of what those two devices do or what they do in a paranormal?
Well, the EMF is electromagnetic energy. It's going to pick up any frequencies that are electronic and shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And then the REM pod picks up like 7 different frequencies, including static electricity. So, but something has to be within 18 inches of it or it's not going to react. And then you have different colored lights go off and different sounds for all of these frequencies. Well, this thing was sounding like Morse code.
Wow.
And one of the ladies that was in the tour was a teacher, and she looks at me and she goes, "Morse code." I go, yeah, it does sound like Morse code. So something was trying to contact us, and they were attached to that chair. Well, then all of us saw a little girl appear in the chair, stand up, and walk towards us, and then disappear. And we think that was Ginger Rogers' spirit, possibly, possibly her spirit. I can't be sure exactly. That
would bring an interesting question, which I don't want to cut you off, but we'll ask that one later because I'm going to ask you about why some people stay on as ghosts or spirits, and others move on. And in this situation, the question would be, why would she come back as a girl rather than a woman if that was indeed her? So just keep those in the back of your mind.
Okay. And for everybody else, she appeared as a full-grown woman. Every other appearance that she made. And that was at that location and another location that I'm going to tell you about. So I asked Stephanie from KC Paranormal if she wanted to do an investigation with me. And we actually did this before the museum opened. And we spent several hours there in the evening. And I had my brother with me, and she had a gentleman with her. We had stuff happening all night long, hearing voices coming through the spirit box, speaking in full sentences. And I recognized the voice of Ginger Rogers and her mother.
Wow.
The voices were exact. And I know those voices. And then we did have someone else come through. It was a man's voice, and he kept saying murder and basement.
Wow.
And it's a dirt floor in that house in the basement.
Wow.
And so they said immediately, are you going to dig up the floor? I said, heck no, I'm not digging that floor up. I do not want to know what's down there. Anyway, so circumstances beyond our control, COVID hit. We had to sell that house. And I sold it to a lady who was a huge Ginger Rogers fan. So, and then she since sold it to somebody else who is Ginger Rogers' cousin.
Oh, wow. Back
So
in the family.
Kind of keeping it in the family. Yeah. Felt good about that. But then Ginger and her mother followed me to my office.
Wow.
So they occasionally, if we are talking about them here, or if I'm moving some of her items, because I have everything that was in the museum I have here at my office. And I do a traveling exhibit with it. So if somebody wants to know about Ginger and Layla, I bring everything out for them to see. It's pretty awesome. So every time if I'm packing something up or, doing something, she comes in. I smell Ginger Rogers perfume, and I have no idea what perfume it is. It's very floral, sweet smelling, and I've never smelled it before, and I only smell it if I'm talking about her. Like, she'll probably appear now because I'm talking about her.
Unique smell.
It's a very unique smell. Then I was setting up something that I was going to put on eBay because I had duplicate of it. And I was they were 2 dolls, and I was getting them ready to go. And then I turned my back to the table, and I got like 4 feet away, and the chair flew across the room at me and hit me in the back. And I turned around, I said, "Oh, Ginger, I guess you don't want me to sell those. You want me to keep them." So I haven't sold them. I haven't sold anything. Yeah, so they're just, and every once in a while we feel Leela around too. And the other day I was talking to my assistant, and 2 pennies fell from the ceiling again.
You have no clue where those came from?
No, they didn't exist. They just fell down in front of us.
Pennies from heaven, huh?
Yeah, and right between us. So yeah, she really still wants me to keep doing something, and I will do it. There is a dark energy there too. I was doing a session one evening with a group, and all of a sudden I started choking. So I went into the back room, and then I came back out, and my assistant at the time, she's very, very psychic. And she looked at me and says, "Why is there a noose around your neck?" I said, oh, that's why I'm choking, because I could still feel it.
Right.
And there was another lady in the group who's also psychic, and she saw the noose around my neck. So I had Violet do some research on this property and found out that it was once a plantation. And then I remote viewed it, and I saw a huge tree. And by the way, there was a huge tree on that property still, but this would have been way back in the 1800s. Right. It may have been, because it was so big. I mean, that tree was, I couldn't reach 5 feet in diameter. Mm-hmm. It was huge.
Yeah.
And I saw a black man hanging from the tree.
Oh my goodness.
So I think now we know what that negative energy is and what was there. way before Ginger Rogers was there. And it's, it stayed there. It's not following me. But she's actually followed me to 2 buildings that I've used as offices since and been in both of them.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. A couple of the questions that I was going to bring up and to take a little bit deeper dive into ghosts and spirits. And from me talking to you, I've had some of my own encounters and some ones that you just can't explain. I mean, there's just no way. But the question is, I think a lot of people might have is when people die, some people tend to stick around and some people go and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one of the dreams I had recently, and I don't believe it was a dream because it was so real, but in the dream itself, it was about 3 or 4 years after my sister Tina had died. She came to me in a dream. And then after, she was checking on me. And then after that, I was in a car with my brother-in-law, and he told me that she was getting ready to cross over. And I don't know if that was just her speaking through the dream or what, but that she had come over to check on me before she left. And I wondered about that one. Like I said, I can't prove it. This is not one of the ones that's, you can just prove it. The one at the church is unexplainable. But he said that she was getting ready to cross over. And the only thing I could come up with on that story was the fact that she was worried about her husband. And so when she died, she probably stuck around to keep an eye on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then once she realized that he was going to be okay, then she decided that she was going to leave to go whatever comes after that. And on the way over and out, crossing over, she decided to check on me. And ironically, that was in my dream. I literally was crying because I was grieving for my sister. And when I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears and stuff. So I know it was more than just a dream.
Yeah.
But I, felt like she was coming by to check on me, to let me know she was okay as well. But I think that's the question a lot of people have. What do you think? Do you think that's the answer, or are there multiple answers as to why maybe some spirits stay here? And sometimes it's like hundreds of years, because sometimes you've got Civil War soldiers. In this case, the trauma was so great. I'm gathering, was the dark force the person that was hung, or was that the person who did the hanging? What do you think on that one?
The dark force was the person who was hung because he was angry.
Right.
And so I'm also a medium, and I have done readings for, over 3,000 people now. I lost count.
Mm-hmm.
And I will often contact someone who has crossed over during those readings. And so I get a lot of information. I mean, basically they've told me what it's like on the other side. So if there's unfinished business, they will try to hang around to finish that. Now, it doesn't matter what it is. If they have been, let's say they've been murdered, that's a time, a lot of spirits will hang around to get justice. They want justice for what happened to them. But there are other reasons. And one of them is, like in your case, she didn't want to move on until she knew that you guys were okay. She was hanging around until she felt like it was appropriate. And the thing is, also, a lot of times there are older people, usually great-grandparents, sometimes grandparents, that become guardians of the family, and they take that role on. So it's not a matter of they have to move on. It's a matter of them making the choice to stay around to help guard the family, and that means all of the family members. And then when the next set comes along, and they cross over, the other set moves on.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there is a lot to it, but in most cases, in some cases where people don't know they've crossed over, that happens. And I've even had some cases with, like you said, things that happened a couple hundred years ago where the entity does not know that they have crossed over, the spirit. And so I'll explain this to them, communicating telepathically, and tell them, advise them to contact their spirit guide who's there and look at the light, and then go to the light with their spirit guide. I recently, about a year ago, my husband and I were at the Sloss Furnace, and we were just tourists going through there. I wasn't really expecting anything. And all of a sudden, like a dozen men who had perished in that furnace, their spirits were still there.
Oh, wow.
So I sat down, I sent my husband on, and I was alone. There was no one around. And I contacted all of them, and they gathered around. I explained that they passed away and it was time for them to move on and to go to the light. And they all did, every one of them. And they were just they were stuck there because they didn't know that they had died. And some of them did know, but they were mad about the situation. They were mad at the company. They didn't have any safety standards. There was no OSHA, and if somebody died, it was just part of the deal to the owners.
Yeah, I didn't really believe in ghosts till about 8 years ago, till I had the experience in the church. And one of the reasons I didn't want to believe in it is because I couldn't imagine living 100, 200 years in that state of torment, where you're got something you're dealing with. I couldn't do it. But when I'll just mention it real quick, about 8 years ago, I was preparing to do a memorial service for a lady in the church. I've told you about this story, but I was up front. The doors were shut. The windows were shut. And I had the lady's picture on the right side of the communion table, which I had put in the center aisle where everybody could see it, up front next to the stage. And then I put the urn in the middle and flowers on the left. And so I'm standing up there when out of nowhere comes this powerful wind. And it comes rushing down that center aisle, and it hits the picture and knocks the picture over, and only the picture over. And I'm like blown away. Then I was watching an episode with Josh Gates. It was Expedition X. It was season 7, episode 1, and he was going to send the young man and young woman out there to investigate this haunted forest in Transylvania, which he had been there 15 years before. Josh Gates had with his crew, and his cameraman was out there recording, and they had a camera on him. And all of a sudden this wind came and hit him and drug him backwards. You got to remember this is a haunted forest. And what I didn't mention is I took 2 years of Greek when I was in college, and biblical Greek. And it was, the word for spirit is pneuma. And that same word for pneuma, for spirit, also means wind. And so it was wind, or a spirit that came rushing down that aisle. And I'll always believe this, that she was making some kind of a point. And I don't know what it was, but she felt angry. She felt angry when she came down that aisle. Now, she had a little bit of mental illness, and I don't know if that carries over into death or not.
It does.
But, the thing I'm grateful for, she didn't hit me like the cameraman, but I felt like she was making a point. Now, that was the day that, or shortly thereafter, as I analyzed it and put it all together. But I don't know how you explain, where does a wind come out of nowhere? I mean, how in the world, even if the doors had been open outside, they would have to make a right turn and then a left turn to be able to do that. And I've never seen wind do that, because once it made even if it happened to hit this and bounce backwards off of the little glass partition that's in the middle, like a wall, I mean, it's going to disperse. It's going to go sideways. And then it would have gone all the way this way. How in the world it would make another left turn, so it's impossible. Nobody can explain that to me by prosaic means.
Right.
And give me an explanation that you can explain that. So that was the day, or shortly thereafter, that I knew that the spirit world and sense of ghost was real. I always believed in a spirit world, but I thought when we died, that was it. But that day I was shown something different, and in church of all places.
Well, that could have also been a message for you specifically to let you know that, there is such thing as a spirit. Yeah. And,
that you don't go that you
don't just go.
Yeah. Because I believe in spirits before, but
if they've got a message, she definitely had a message to say to somebody.
Yeah, I feel like she said something that she was telling me in some way, and this is all interpretation on my part, so I could be wrong, but that I had something wrong. And I think she was making a point to show me that whatever I believed, that there was something wrong about it. And it probably specifically, like you said, had to do with that. Yeah, people do stay behind if they have unfinished business and stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Okay. So the question I have now is, did Ginger stay behind because of her mother? Or what's your speculation on that? Because the mother-daughter thing, I don't think that's uncommon, but we have a specific example right here.
Yeah, they were in life very close to each other. Ginger's mother was her manager as well. So she was on every movie set, every TV show until she died with Ginger. And then Ginger was on her own after that. But I think that both of them were very powerful personalities.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take no for an answer. Leela and Ginger both championed for women getting equal pay in the movie industry, and they got it. In fact, she was probably the first one who did. And then Ginger was the highest paid actress in the 1940s. But I think that they both had an attachment to the house. They visited it. They were back there in 1941. They were back there in 1964 when President Harry Truman, they were back there before that to visit President Truman at the new Truman Library, where Ginger happened to mention, oh, we have Harry Truman Day, but we don't have a Ginger Rogers Day. So Harry says, well, I'll fix that. So he made Ginger Rogers Day, July 16th, on her birthday, and then she came back with her mother for that. And then she also was back in 1994, shortly before she passed, and was here in Independence. Had a big parade for her and everything. Mayor Ron Stewart, his wife Marilyn, was responsible for that.
She died in 94, 95, somewhere in there.
Yeah, right, 95, right after that. So they were visiting that house. She was born there. I think they lived there for about 4 years, would be my guess. Nobody knows exactly how long they were there, but that's what I think. And I think they were attached to it, and they also got a lot of attention from people in this area and people who came in from all over to see her. Here, there were, crowds of people, not just a few. We're talking thousands of people who were here to see her on those occasions. So, there was an attachment there. I think she does have some unfinished business, but I don't think it's related to here. I think it's going elsewhere. She had a house in Oregon. She had a house in Hollywood, near Hollywood. She had a ranch in Oregon. They had milk cows.
That's where I am. I'm in Oregon.
The Rogue River is where they were at the Rogue River Ranch. Yeah, and I have some of those milk bottles from there.
In Medford. Yeah.
You're in Medford. Oh, you're real close.
Well, I'm actually up towards Albany and Salem area, but it's just a few hours down the Interstate 5.
Yeah.
And I've been there many, many times. I guess one of the questions I had is, like, I can see the house being a draw, but then when you mentioned it, well, the mom died first, obviously. And so could she have stayed behind because of Leela stayed behind because of Ginger? And then when Ginger died, she didn't want to leave mom. So, could they have actually trapped themselves in this situation because they were so close?
It could be, but
connection.
That could be. And also because I have a lot of her things.
Oh, yeah.
So, people get attachments to things, objects.
Oh, yeah.
And like I have a drawing, that a self-portrait that Ginger did. And some of her movie memorabilia and her shoes and other things. So, yeah, they get attached to objects, and objects can actually be haunted themselves because a person is attached to them. A spirit is attached to them. I'm not feeling anything malevolent. I'm not feeling that they're negative in any way. And I'm not I don't even haven't even tried to attempt to ask them to move on, to cross over, because I think they're in full control of that. They'll do that when they're ready to go. But I think there's some other unfinished business they're not happy with, and there are some things that happened after Ginger's death that was not good. For instance, there's a church. I won't name the church, but there's a church that she left things to, and she left the rights to her likeness and to anything else that she had. So basically, nobody can do anything. Nobody can write a book about Ginger Rogers.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and that's why you haven't seen one out there. There was one about Ginger and Fred, but perhaps they got a license to do that, but they will stop anybody that has anything to do with,
because the church had control of it.
They had total control, and that's another reason. Right. I had another reason I shut the museum down was because the church wanted total control over the museum.
Oh my goodness. That's
they're in New York, and they're not even here. They wanted control over it.
Yeah, well,
So
let me be clear. That's not the way churches are supposed to operate. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a pastor, and I guarantee that's not the way that we would operate. But as I tell people all the time, I think most churches today, or many of them anyway, look more like the Pharisees than they do like Jesus. And my goal is to be more like Jesus than like the Pharisees. And so that's the kind of stuff that just really turns people off from the church. And I understand why. I mean, that's just wrong. I had a great question come to mind, though, because it always bothered me. And I mentioned it to you about being here 200 years, 300 years, whatever. Does time exist the same for them as it does for us?
See, that's a good question. I've had opportunity lately to ask that, and the answer is no.
Yeah,
it does not, because when they phase out of a physical body, they're in a higher dimension.
Right.
The spirit is in a higher dimension, and that goes for all of our light bodies. Our 6 light bodies will go to another dimension. Now, you can have contact back and forth. Sometimes they have no clue what year it is here for us. They don't understand that. I mean, I've worked with several spirits who crossed over, like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and they had no idea they had been gone that long out of their physical body. So when I explained it to them, they seemed to understand it, and then they were ready to move on. And another thing too, a lot of people are very concerned about helping spirits move on. Well, really, it's their decision to make. It's not ours. We can give them some information, but if they're just not ready to go, and if they feel comfortable, a lot of times the house will be haunted by a person who used to live in the house, or they built the house. That's a very common thing to see.
Right.
And sometimes they just feel most comfortable there, and they want to hang out for a while. And if they're not harming anybody, I say, fine, you can stay.
What about like in situations, and whether these are actual cases or they're real or not real, I'm not going to conjecture on, but I've seen a few of the shows on TV where there will be a malevolent being, spirit, and that is literally terrorizing and abusing benevolent spirits in the home.
Yeah.
And so you really would want to get, at the very least, you'd want to get the malevolent, maybe they were a murderer in life, maybe they were just evil or wicked or whatever. You would definitely want that person gone, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And I do tackle those situations. It's a matter of strength of will is really the basics of what that is. And you tell them they are leaving, and you have more power than they do, and you just simply push them out with your power. And 99% of the time that works.
Okay.
1% of the time or less, you'll run into something that's demonic.
Okay.
It's not common. I very rarely see it. It's usually, if there's something bad going on, it's a person spirit, and they were mean in life and they're mean in death. and they just really hate what happened to them. They hate that they died, that, they hate that somebody else is living in their house, all of that. But that can usually be remedied. For the very small percentage that turns out to be demonic, I choose not to deal with that, and I call in a demonologist to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a scary one. If you think about it, I've never had to
Yeah.
confront a demon, but
I have, and I've gotten rid of them, but I'm just too old for that now. I don't want to deal with it anymore.
it's a battle and a half. I've heard stories, and I know people that have actually had recordings of demons, but I've been very fortunate. I don't know, they just tend to leave me alone, or they're not involved with the people that I deal with, and I'm very, very happy with that, because that's not something that negative energy I do not want near me, or near my family, or near my church. And so I guess in a sense, I've been very, very blessed. I've done youngest funeral I've ever done was somebody that was 20 years old. And I don't know how I would handle doing the funeral of a 4-year-old. I don't know how any pastor would be able to deal with something like that. It'd be hard enough to deal with the family, but to get up and actually speak, I guess in some ways I've just been blessed. I've been protected, however you want to call it, and stuff like that. Okay. This was an interesting case. Ginger Roger, famous movie star, singer, dancer, she was very, very, very famous in her day. And so that's an extraordinary case. A lot of documentation goes along with this. Let's talk about, if you can think of it, what's a case that was as interesting or more interesting, that, a ghost story that's kind of bizarre, scary, hilarious, or whatever, what's as you think through the cases, because I know you do a lot of UFO stuff, and that's probably your main thing, but you also been involved with ghost as well. That maybe be your secondary thing, or maybe
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Okay.
Yeah.
This is number one, and ufology stuff is number two. Okay.
Yeah.
But you've been with MUFON so long. How many years have you been with MUFON?
Since 96.
Okay. Now, MUFON doesn't necessarily investigate ghost paranormal, correct?
Nope.
Okay.
They do not, unless it has something to do with a UFO experience.
Right.
Or an experiencer or an abductee. Occasionally things will happen that look like they're ghostly paranormal, but in the cases that I've done, I've found that it's usually ETs that are involved in making poltergeist activity and moving things, things like that. Occasionally you do run into a case where a location is like a portal hotspot. And so you've got all kinds of things coming in and out, entities of all types, spirits of all types, aliens, you name it. They're using that portal to go between dimensions. So, for instance, I have a fellow investigator, Jean Walker. In fact, she wrote a book called Family Secrets, and she talks about all this activity was going on in her house, and she asked me to remote view it, and I did. I said, "Oh, you've got a giant portal over your house. That's why all of these paranormal things are happening inside the house, outside the house, getting pictures of monsters in the windows that just look like alien monsters that nothing like anything normal that you could figure." She's got pictures of those. And she's had multiple ET experiences and abductions. And that's all going on because of that. Right. So when you do an investigation, you could be up against anything.
Okay. Well, let's transition real quick then, because you just kind of gave us a bridge. Let's talk about remote viewing. What exactly is remote viewing? And I'm going to give you a heads up. We're heading towards psionics, but I want to start with the base.
Okay.
Baseline. What is remote viewing? What is your involvement in it? And can you just explain it to people exactly in simple English, so that they, people that aren't familiar with it might be able to understand it?
Okay. I'm a natural remote viewer. I did not go through any training, or I don't do what the military does, which is CRV, controlled remote viewing, where anybody can be trained to do that. Of course, they usually pick people who are naturally psychic to do it. I am a natural psychic. By the time I was 2.5, we knew I was seeing a lot more than everybody else was. But I received a boost in 1985 when Valiant Thor appeared to me, and gave me X-ray vision, as he called it. He says, now you have X-ray vision. So at that point, I was able to look through a human body, look at the bones, the organs, everything, and do intuitive medical diagnosis. But it's more than that. I'm actually seeing physically.
Is that like in a trance state when that happens?
It
remote
used to
viewing
be.
state? Okay.
I put myself in a very light trance state. I can just flip just like that.
Right.
Most people will not be able to do that unless they are in a deeper trance state and they're meditating.
Right.
But I've just done this for so many years that I don't need to do that anymore. I can flip it on. So basically, remote viewing, it sounds like you're looking at something far away, which could be a possibility. But
without being there, though, right?
Anything even close to you,
right,
you can do. You can, and also the nice thing about it is you can look at past events.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if I'm doing a UFO investigation, and somebody says on this date this thing happened to me, okay, I will look at that date at that location and see what happened to that person. Same thing with paranormal activity in a house. Somebody's got a problem, they want some help. I'll remote view it before I even step out the door to see exactly what is going on there and what types of entities are there. And a lot of times I won't even have to leave. That entity knows I'm coming. They're gone.
Oh, wow.
And then I don't even have to go out the door. The person says, oh, you took care of the problem.
Because you already went there through
I'm already
viewing.
there.
You made contact that way.
Yeah. To put it simply, I send my etheric body out to a location, look at the situation, whether it's right now or in the past, get all the details. And I'm really standing there at that time. And it's very, very, very clear to me. It's like you're watching a videotape, but it's real time at that time. And then I come back, write everything down or explain what it is that I saw.
Yeah, and it's really, people have to understand, remote viewing sounds wild if you've never heard of it before. But if you go back and you go into FOIA, you're going to discover that there's a program that was called Stargate. And it was a program by the CIA and the Stanford Research Institute, and it's well documented. And the government actually was using it. Are still using it, even though they denied it and stuff like that. So this sounds kind of wild and crazy until you actually do a little bit of research on it. The truth of the matter is people are being attacked today through remote viewing. And I know I had an incident happen for about 3 hours where these just crazy emotions were hitting me and they came out of nowhere. And then they ended 3 hours later and there wasn't any residual. So if you're upset about something, you don't just shut it off and turn it on. It does not work that way. And I was also working with another experiencer who had similar situations, and they warned me that when other experiencers get together with them, stuff happens. And they had been attacked themselves. I talked to Margie about it, and she told me, you told me, Margie, about another friend who had been attacked. I've talked to another person since then who's kind of famous in the X community. I won't give her voice, but she's had the same thing. Now, when it happened to you, you traced it back, which kind of fits the mindset that I had already, that this is some kind of MILAB or something similar to it, some government contractors or something that are doing this on the behalf of the government. And I think when you remote viewed him and followed this remote viewer back, where did you end up finding this one at, this guy?
I found him underneath a military base, which is a place that I don't go. I don't go to any military or secret locations, but that line took me there, and I was pretty mad about the situation because it wasn't only me, it was two other people as well who are also investigators, and all three of us heard these voices in our head at the same time. It sounded like our own voices saying something very negative.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is not my thought.
Right.
And I traced it. So yeah, I know it's military. They also have the ability, just to give you a heads up, to create a portal in your house walk in the portal, push you down a set of stairs, and then walk back out.
Yeah.
They've done that to me twice.
They have the
And they just
ability.
did it to a good friend of mine, and she broke 3 bones in her leg and had a concussion because they did that to her. And I have another person who's involved in ufology who was pushed down the stairs twice by an unseen force. So there are forces out there. They have figured things out probably through reverse engineering, but they know how to create portals. They can be anywhere at any time. And a lot of this negative stuff happening is our own military, our own government doing it.
That's exactly where I'm on it. That's exactly what they had warned me about. And then when you said that, and it just seems like everybody I talk to that's been involved with this or had this happen to you, but they've done worse things than that. I don't want to talk about them because they're not pleasant. But I mean, getting thoughts in your mind is one thing. Having something physically happen to you is another thing. But I thought about it later. I was on my way to California to do a recording of my story. And I don't know why, but I suspect they didn't want me telling my story for whatever reason. And so I suspect that there was a reason was to derail that story, to derail me from going and doing it. Or just simply the other possibility is that because I contacted the other experiencer and there was other people that had been in her life that had been attacked as well. So it could have been either of those, but I'm a guy that likes to connect dots, and I kind of wonder if it wasn't connected, because it was a hard thing to do. If you're an experiencer and you haven't really gone public, and I haven't really done it as a podcaster, because I'm not here usually to tell my story. I'm here to let my guests tell their story, but this is something that we have a connection on and stuff like that. But this kind of leads to the next question. And that's the question of psionics. Is psionics the evolution of remote viewing?
I am getting, and so I'm remote viewing that right now. I'm getting a yes.
Okay.
That this will help people remote view. This will help get the job done faster.
Yeah.
And, it's high tech.
Well, the thing I don't like about psionics, the way the contractors, of course, from Jake Barber is where I'm talking about, is the fact that these government contractors are using psionics to bring these craft down. And the egg-shaped one is the one that was being showed in the video. It wasn't that Jake provided that video. Somebody else did, but that was the egg-shaped UAP, or looked like it anyway, that he was hauling on it. But it bothered me to think about if there, and I believe there are, that if there are species out there and we're going to make contact with them by basically taking control of their craft against their will, I mean, what kind of message is that? And my friend Steve Neal from Breaking the Silence, he's the one who's going to, my story is going to come out March 8th on Breaking the Silence channel. But I like what he says because it kind of fits with my own experience. It doesn't mean that there are not any bad alien experiences out there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from my perspective and from Steve's perspective, we're not really afraid of the aliens. We're afraid of the humans because they seem to be the ones doing the nastiest things like we're describing right now. And it doesn't mean that there aren't bad alien species out there. All I'm trying to say is from my experience, the ones that I have encountered, the ones that I've participated with, it hasn't been traumatic at all. The trauma is coming from the mill lab type experiences for me. And so I hope that we get better as a species. I really hope that we evolve and we get rid of this desire to conquer, this desire to have war, this desire to pillage, and because nobody wins when that goes on. And so I hope that we mature better than that. What are the what is the, and we talked about ghosts, we talked about remote viewing. If we're getting close to an hour, I'd like to kind of end it on maybe, if you think about your most extraordinary event, whether it be UFO, whether it be remote viewing, or whether it be the spirit world, what would be the one event that you investigated that stands out above all the others?
Well, as far as what I've investigated, there was a case in Kansas City in 2011. We had a huge UFO flap in October of 2011, more than anywhere in the world in Kansas City.
Wow.
Multiple sightings for the whole month. On October the 4th, two gentlemen, a man drove up to a parking lot at an apartment complex, and there were a bunch of kids. They were all pointing in the sky, and it got his attention, so he looked, and there was something he didn't recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And so he hollered at his friend he was coming to see, who had come out on the balcony 3 stories up. And so they both were taking video. His friend had a flash on his camera, and he was taking camera photos. And for some reason, that flash got its attention, whatever this object was, and it came close. It got very close. In fact, it got to the point where it was so close, all the children ran away and hid. And the primary witness walked over to it. It was just a few feet off the ground at that point, maybe 6 feet off the ground. He walked close to it, and he was maybe 20 feet away when a green mist came out of the object and went over him. And he did not know. He thought he was taking picture, not stopping. And his friend was yelling at him, and his friend's wife came out and saw this UFO. So they're at the balcony, and this UFO is at the level, and it has turned up sideways by this point, made terrible noises doing it. This mist came out, and the first gentleman was in a trance. He doesn't remember anything that happened for the next 20 minutes of time. And both of their cameras stopped, and there's a 20-minute gap between photos. But they both thought they were taking pictures the whole time. Now, in reviewing the pictures later, there are extraterrestrials standing on a set of stairs that came out of that UFO. They did not see with the physical eye, but they're there in the photographs.
Oh, really? Wow.
Uh-huh. And then
you have a book about this, don't you? That you
I
wrote?
have. It's the Kansas City UFO Flaps.
Right.
The story is in that book. I'm going to be making a longer book about this whole event.
Do people have access to those pictures or not?
Some of the pictures are in the book. The pictures of the ETs are not there. I haven't been given authorization to put them out there yet. But a picture of the UFO is there.
Okay.
In the book. And so it gets stranger. After this event, they're both kind of freaking out. The object went away. Okay. Right. And by the way, we traced the object with multiple witnesses reporting that same evening all the way across from Raytown to Blue Springs, Raytown, Kansas City, and then going north on 435 highway. So a lot more people saw this UFO than reported it, which is always the case. Yeah, only a very small percentage of people report, maybe 1% report something. But we had multiple reports that night, so that was unusual. After that, he got up to leave, and his friend said, "You can't leave yet." He goes, "I have to leave. I have to leave." Well, all he remembers from that point to the next morning is waking up at the Kaw River. He had no idea how he got there or why he went there. So we think that he was probably abducted during that time period. Now, get this. After that event, he got healing abilities.
Oh my
He
goodness.
can heal people, and he can fix cars by touching them.
Huh.
And then he's had both men have had multiple UFO sightings since then, some very, very close encounters. They've seen helicopters chasing UFOs. They just always seem to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then the first witness has developed a relationship with an extraterrestrial that he calls Facidio. And when he's about ready to contact him telepathically, he makes sure there's an X in the sky that looks like contrails or chemtrails. If there's an X in the sky, this witness knows that he's going to be contacted by this ET, and then he has telepathic communication. And so it is ongoing. And both gentlemen, by the way, had UFO close encounters with extraterrestrials when they were children.
Yeah,
Very
these usually
young.
are lifelong experiences. It's
It is.
really rare that it's a one-time experience as well.
Right.
And about everybody I've talked to at some point or another, just about everybody. And sometimes you just don't know it as well. In fact, that's one of the questions I'm going to ask in my next podcast is why do some people remember and some people don't? You know, maybe I'll ask you that question and we'll close out with that. Why do you think some people remember their abduction? Some experiencers don't like to be called abductees. They prefer to be called experiencers.
Yeah.
But whichever term you want to use, what's your opinion on that? And I'll carry that over into the next podcast.
Well, there are basically several reasons for that. And I believe it has to do with your own level of consciousness and what you are ready for. Then when you're ready, the memories will come. Something will trigger a memory. Something you see or hear or smell, and then all of a sudden this memory will come back. It'll be a short one. It won't be the whole story in most cases,
Right.
but gradually you'll put together the pieces. And I think that this is done purposely. There's some sort of a block put on your brain, whether you put it there yourself or if these extraterrestrials are, obviously much more advanced than we are, do that in order to protect us.
Like screen memories.
I think, screen memories too, owls and things like that. I think that's done just so your brain can handle it. And it's your emotions. It's what you're ready to do. And, for me, I've seen multiple extraterrestrials. I've had close encounters. I've had them work on me and heal me. I've had them give me certain abilities, like Val Thor did, but many, many contact experiences, and it's all been positive, every bit of it. Now, I have had incidents where I'm investigating something else that somebody else is having bad experiences, and I know they do, but it just has not happened to me that way.
Right. One last thing. You use your remote viewing gift to help out in missing person cases, and you will work with the police, and you don't charge any money at all for doing that. So people contact you at margiekay.com. Is that the correct?
Correct. And there are instructions there for if it's homicide, missing person, or a big, large theft case that if law enforcement need help or a private investigator needs help. I'm a licensed private investigator too. Contact me. I'll give you an instructions how to do that.
And an example of that, I remember from the last podcast, there was a girl who was missing, and the cops had went over there, but they missed the shed. And I think you remote viewed it, and they went back over and found her exactly where you said she was, and literally kept her from being human trafficked. So if there's anyone that has a missing person or something like that, or police, Margie Kay would be the great one to talk to. And you can find her on margiekay.com. Well, Margie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I want to thank every one of you for watching. Just remember, if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you at the next video. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.